Odds are that your first investment round will be a friends and family round. In today's video, I'll walk through how those typically work. Hi, I'm Steve Morris. I use this Startup SOS channel to provide practical how-to advice for new entrepreneurs who are building a growth business. So a friends and family round is simply raising money from people you know because they're in your network of friends or family. And when I say friends and family, I mean the extended friends and family network of the founding team. It doesn't have to be just the CEO. Assuming you do have co-founders, you can certainly reach out to that expanded network of friends and family when you're looking at raising your first round of money. Why look at friends and family for the first round? Well, the reality is they're the people that know you and hopefully trust you, and are the people who are the most likely to write that early check. Now, having said that, they can also be sometimes a bit less sophisticated, less knowledgeable about investment in startups. And it's really important that you set expectations when you raise money from friends and family to make sure that they know that investing in startups is risky. Let them know that you'll do everything you reasonably can to make this successful and to create a return for them. But it's important for them to not invest any more money than they can afford to lose, because that's always a possibility. That's always a tricky part of the discussion when you're trying to pitch how great the opportunity is. But if you want friends and family to stay friends and family, even if the startup doesn't work out, it's pretty important to set those expectations. So we'll come back to that as we walk through the process. In an earlier video, I talked about the 17 steps in closing an angel round. The friends and family round can be a little bit simpler than those 17 steps simply because it's very early stage and because it's people you know. So this will be a little bit of a shortened process compared to that full 17-step process, but you might go check out that video also just to get an overview of what a little more complete funding round might look like. Even though it is friends and family, even friends and family are not that likely to write a check unless they think you've thought this through. One way to show them that you have thought it through is to go out and talk to prospective customers to test your assumptions. Show them that you've done customer discovery. Use a value proposition canvas to capture your assumptions about the value proposition. Use a business model canvas to capture your assumptions, your hypotheses about the business model. And then go test those in talking to customers. Now, we've got videos on this channel for both capturing those assumptions and a lot of videos on how to go do customer interviews, customer discovery, to test those assumptions. So I suggest you check out those videos to prepare you to go capture and test your business assumptions. Now, once you've tested your assumptions, well, first of all, you'll learn a lot. Your idea will probably change a little bit based on the feedback you got from customers. But hopefully you've decided that yes, there is a compelling need, and if you create the solution you have in mind, there are customers who will actually pay for it. That's good. Next step, it's probably a good time to actually put a legal entity in place, because ultimately you'll need a legal entity that can own intellectual property, that can have a checking account, so you have a place to actually put the money as you close it. And as you do the next step of bringing on a team, you'll need a legal entity set up so that you have something that you can parcel up into ownership, either stock in a corporation or units of ownership in an LLC, because presumably your co-founders, if you have co-founders, will also want to own a piece of the company. Which leads us to step 3, which is to build a team. Again, even for friends and family, you'll have more credibility in raising money if you have a team, if you're more than just a one-person company. It shows that you can get other people inspired, that it's not just you that believe in this idea, but you've been able to convince one or two other people to jump in the boat with you and help make this a reality. It just makes your business more credible. And the reality is, no one person has all the skills necessary to build a company, even to reach the very early stage milestones of, say, building a prototype. It would be a typical one. You'll probably need more than just yourself to pull that off. And this is not a bad time to go ahead and find those folks so that you look more like a real company when you approach friends and family. But as you do build that team, remember that you do need to protect your company. There's a video on the channel about protecting your company as you build a team. You'll want to protect your intellectual property and actually even protect your stock ownership just in case a team member leaves the company fairly early. Now, the next step is always a challenging one, which is to select a fundable milestone. You're going to go ask for money from friends and family. The question is, money to do what? And the answer, hopefully, will be money to reach a first milestone. And that first milestone needs to be, I would suggest at least, a fundable milestone. In other words, something that once you reach it is a concrete accomplishment, something that reduces the perceived risk, shows investors that you can get something done, and gives you access to that next stage of funding, whether that's an accelerator program or an angel investment for like a pre-seed amount of money. Whatever it is, it's something that's going to prepare you for the next step and raise your value, hopefully, so you can close that money at an acceptable cost. Now, one of the questions you'll ask then is, okay, how much will it cost to reach that milestone? It's going to give you an idea of how much you need to raise. This is a good area to be a little bit conservative because your first milestone will probably take longer and cost more than you think. So you probably want to pad this estimate just a little bit. Then the question is going to be, can you raise that money from your friends and family? And that leads us to the next step, which is asking exactly that question. This really comes down to a question of, do you have enough friends and family between you and the rest of your founding team to have access to the amount of money that you'll need to reach your milestone? So the idea is to take a look at your list of friends and family, build a list, and estimate what kind of potential you believe each person on that list might be able to invest, and then add up those numbers. Now, you'll want to see a funding potential number that's significantly higher than what you need, because obviously not everybody is going to invest just because they're friends and family. There's no guarantee. And perhaps some people will be comfortable investing a little bit less than what you thought they might be able to. So you'll certainly want to be sure that the funding potential is significantly more than the amount that you need. And the question then is, what if it's not? Right? What if the milestone that you chose is going to cost $500,000 and you think you'd do well to maybe raise $200,000 or $300,000 from your friends and family? Okay, then it's time to go back to step 4 and reassess your fundable milestone. See if you can come up with a milestone that is still concrete, that proves that you're making headway, that opens up that next level of funding, again, either from typically an accelerator program or some kind of an angel investment, but one that costs noticeably less than your first idea. And here's where you're going to iterate. You're going to iterate to come up with a milestone that's feasible to fund with what you believe to be the capacity for funding of your friends and family, and a milestone that also provides you with enough headway, enough traction, that it'll allow you access to that next level of funding, whatever that next level of funding might be. Now, once that you've come up with a milestone that you think you can fund through friends and family, then you're ready for step 6. And step 6 would be to figure out what approach to fundraising you're going to take. And part of that involves selecting an SEC exemption. Now, that doesn't sound super exciting. It's not super exciting, but it is important because it really will determine what the approach is that you can take to fundraising. One of the big questions you'll have to wrestle with is, when you look at your friends and family network that you're counting on to fund this next milestone, how many of them qualify as accredited investors and how many are non-accredited? Now, accredited and non-accredited is just an SEC definition based on either income or net worth. And if a person is accredited, if they meet that criteria, you have to provide them with a lot less information when you accept money from them if you're using a traditional angel investor type exemption, which would be the Reg D 506B. Now, at this point, I would suggest you go back and check out the video on the channel about SEC exemptions, because it's a good thing to understand the range of options that you have. If your friends and family really do qualify as accredited investors, Reg D 506B is not a bad way to go. It's by far the most common exemption that entrepreneurs use to get investment funding for their startup. If you have a lot of friends and family who you think will want to invest but who don't qualify as accredited investors, you'll have to step back and look at some other options. You certainly can take money from non-accredited investors using the 506B exemption, but you'll have to provide them with a lot of documentation about the risk. And that requires significant legal fees, which just raises the expense of you raising your money. And that's kind of a problem. You don't want to eat up a substantial portion of the money you're going to raise by paying legal fees. So you might want to look at some other alternatives. One of them might be to look at a state exemption. The majority of states do take advantage of the SEC allowance to do a state exemption, where if you just raise money from investors in that state, then the state can set the rules, not the SEC. And sometimes those rules are a lot more forgiving and will allow you to raise money from non-accredited as well as accredited investors. So that's something to check out. And in general, check out the video on SEC exemptions for other possibilities that you might want to consider. But that's step 6, is to decide which SEC exemption you're going to use, because that will determine the approach you're going to take in raising the money. Now that takes us to step 7. I'm going to assume in step 7 that you probably are using the 506B exemption or maybe a state level exemption, either of which would allow you to raise funding using a convertible note or a SAFE, a simple agreement for future equity. Those are by far the two most common mechanisms that one would use for a very early stage investment. You could consider doing a priced round if you used an approach that uses a fixed set of documents, so like the Series Seed round documents, where you take a set of documents and you all agree that you're just not going to change them. You just fill in the key terms, the pre-money valuation, stock price, etc., and not have the lawyers go do a lot of tweaks. Because again, it's the lawyering that tends to cost a lot of money. But that's certainly a less common approach, using something like the Series Seed compared to using a convertible note or a SAFE. A convertible note and a SAFE are both really simple legal documents, and that means much less in the way of legal expense, and it's a pretty practical approach usually for doing a friends and family round. So once you've selected your approach to raising money, say the SAFE or a convertible note, I'll assume from here on out, the next question is, what are the terms you're going to use? Now, whether it's a note or a SAFE, you can have a discount and you can have a valuation cap. Now, if those are new topics for you, I'd suggest you check out the videos on the channel about how a convertible note works and how a SAFE works. You'll probably be looking at the post-money SAFE, the newer version of the SAFE. Those videos explain how those work and how discounts and valuation caps work. So that'll be one thing you have to decide, whether you want to have a discount, whether you want to have a valuation cap, and assuming you do, what values do you choose for those two terms? Now, if it's a note, a convertible note that you're using, there's a couple of other key terms you need to define, one being the interest rate and the other being the maturity date, how long before the note matures. Now, in the video I did on convertible note versus SAFE, I argued that the SAFE really is the more entrepreneur-friendly approach to raising money, because it has no interest rate and it has no maturity date. It never expires. However, you may be in a part of the country where people are more comfortable investing with convertible notes, in which case you might have to be open to that option. And in that case, then yes, you need to figure out an interest rate and a term. All right, so you figured out which approach you're going to use. You figured out your key terms for either that note or that SAFE. Next step, step 9. And step 9 is to draft the actual legal documents, because clearly you'll need to have those ready to go as you start asking people for investment. So if it's a convertible note, there's two legal agreements, a promissory note and then typically a separate note agreement that documents various factors regarding the note. And very typically then, along with that, assuming you're using a 506B exemption and focusing on accredited investors, you'll have an accredited investor questionnaire, because using the 506B exemption, an investor can self-qualify as being accredited. They can simply state and sign a statement that says they're an accredited investor, and that's good enough for you. In the case of a SAFE, you simply download the SAFE agreement from the Y Combinator site. They have different versions of the SAFE document depending on whether you're going to have a discount and no cap, or a cap and no discount, or both a cap and a discount, or neither, no cap and no discount. They've got the right boilerplate for that agreement. You simply fill in the blanks on the key terms that you're going to use. And again, assuming you're using a 506B exemption, you'll also likely want to use an accredited investor questionnaire. Now, with a SAFE, the other thing you might have is a pro rata agreement. If it's a post-money SAFE, the investor is getting some certain percent of the company, and a pro rata agreement would allow them to reinvest in the later priced round so that they can maintain that percentage ownership. So that's another document you might need to include in your packet. And exactly how a pro rata agreement works is covered in our earlier video on the post-money SAFE. So you've done your customer discovery, you've decided on the approach you're going to take, you've decided on your terms, you've got your legal documents together. It's time to put together the story. Now, in a little bit later, a little more formal round, we might say it's time to put together a pitch deck. You know, very often for a friends and family round, you're not really putting together a formal pitch deck because you're not dealing with people that do a lot of investing in startups. But you are putting together the story. You'll have to put together the story of what this opportunity is. What is the unmet need? What is your solution? And what have you learned in customer discovery that really convinced you that, yes, there is an opportunity here? And why is it that you believe you can win, that you believe you can be a success in this market? Again, based on what you learned in customer discovery. And of course, remember too, in the story, to include the risk, the idea that, hey, you're going to try your best to make this successful, but startups are risky, and your friends and family should not invest more than they can afford to lose. So put together that story, practice it a bit so you can tell it in a compelling and confident way, and then you're ready for the next step. And step 11 is to make the ask, to set up meetings with your friends and family, tell the story, answer their questions, and see if you can get them comfortable with the idea of investing. Now, when I say make the ask, I'm not suggesting you literally ask for the money. You're going to probably do something more in the way of a series of trial closes. Okay, what does that mean? Well, it means not asking outright for the money, but it means asking questions that take you a step down the path toward getting the money. So, for example, after telling the story, you might be asking what they think of the story and if they have any questions. You might want to ask, what more do you need to understand about this opportunity before you'd be interested in investing? You know, maybe they ask about, well, what is the structure of the investment? Well, then you have an opportunity to talk about your SAFE or your convertible note and what the terms are. You might provide them with the documents to review and then follow up later to see if they have any questions. Sometimes people get a little bit nervous making an investment because they wonder if you'll be able to raise the total amount that you actually need. Let's say you need $100,000 and you're talking to people about writing a $10,000 check each. Well, if I write my $10,000 check to you, but no other friend and family member writes a check, that's a little bit awkward. It says, okay, you have $10,000 from me, but you don't have the other $90,000 that you need to hit that milestone. And so my money doesn't necessarily do you that much good. And then what happens? Well, in a scenario like that, if you need to, you might need to make a commitment that says, okay, I tell you what, if I can find other friends and family to commit to a total of $90,000, would you be willing to commit to $10,000? That's another kind of a trial close that basically gets a commitment that says, yes, if I do this, will you do that? So again, you do what you have to do to make people comfortable, answer the questions, do additional research, and even consider maybe changing the terms depending on what your friends and family are comfortable with. And hopefully you get to the point where you get people comfortable in actually making the decision. Now, by the way, you might want to have these meetings one-on-one. You might want to have them as a group. You might want to perhaps get 1 or 2 friends and family lined up to support you and be ready to invest, and then have maybe a meeting with a larger group. So you have a couple of people who can be evangelists and help persuade other friends and family that they too should go ahead and make the investment. But once you get there, once you have people comfortable with the documents, with the approach, with the amount that they can invest, then it's time to go for the close. And closing, of course, means you get the documents signed, you get a check written, and now in a later stage, this would usually be an electronic money transfer for a really early stage friends and family. Certainly writing a check is very common. But it's good to keep in mind that the round, the investment, is never over until the money's actually in the bank and the check clears. Okay, up until that time, anything and everything can go wrong. So it's good to keep focused on not just being comfortable that, oh, I've got the verbal commitment, we're essentially done. No, you're not done until the documents are signed, you have the check, it's in the bank, and it clears. Then you're done with the round. So keep focused on actually getting the money into the bank before you relax and decide that the round is over. Step 14 then is to do the filings that you need to do. You may need to do some filings with the SEC depending on which approach you selected for your exemption, or you may need to do some filing with the state if you went more of a state-specific route. So whichever approach you did, do be sure you do the correct filings with whichever government entity you need to. And then step 15, of course, you've closed the round, that's great. Now you got to focus on hitting that milestone. You need to reach that milestone so that you then, of course, are positioned to do exactly what that fundable milestone was intended to do, which is position you to raise the next amount of funding so that you can accomplish the next fundable milestone you need to hit. And that is an overview of the typical steps you might go through to close a friends and family round. If that was helpful, please click the like button and share it with other entrepreneurs. Leave a comment or a question. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do that and click the notification bell, because we always have more videos on the way for new entrepreneurs who are building a growth business. This particular video is part of our sequence on early stage funding. There's a link to the playlist for the entire series right here. So be sure and check that out for more information, more background on how to close investor funding to fund your startup. That's a wrap for now. Thank you very much for watching.